for SK to pick it up here. Trying to walk through the smoke, but it's just not going to happen. SK Gaming, second major championship in a row. They are your winners.
Despite Fnatic's best efforts, it goes the distance. It goes all 3 maps, and we have our champions, the best team in the world, Ninjas in Pajamas.
Red touching the box, are they going to peek? Holding it now, and there is it. It's just out of Flamey. It's not going to happen. Astralis have won the Face at London main. There's no time. He just has to watch that clock tick down. This is it. Na'Vi have taken the major.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Time Travel Land, the content everyone professes to love but no one actually watches. I'm your host Richard Lewis. We have a plethora of expertise as always to talk about our theoretical time travel tournament with all the best teams in CSGO history. Of course, we've got Jason Moses O'Toole looking swish there, loving life in America. No problems out there right now. Feeling good.
Not at all. Yeah.
Not at all. Obviously, Chad, I never know what part of the world's in. I just always assume it's either Katowice or Berlin for you, right? Isn't it? Do you even know what Australia's like at the moment?
I come to Malta to simulate the heat. It's pretty similar right now.
Yeah, okay, I forget. Yeah, you're in your little tax haven like all the other smart people, right?
No, it's for a lovely swim every morning, Richard. Yeah.
My bad. And of course, Duncan Thorin Shields, the esports historian, is joining us. The most hated man in CSGO, according.
Well, I appreciate it, though, to be fair. One thing I will say, I actually take as a compliment that that's the scale we're even cranking it up to. I'm not even just like, mildly disliked or people are indifferent to me. I'm actually hated. Actually, it's not even just that they don't like they don't want me to exist. I shouldn't actually exist in this realm.
Yes.
It's a bold take. It is a bold take.
They do make some compelling arguments.
The only problem is, I will say, they're way behind the game. Kids in school figured that out like 40 years ago, guys. What you guys talking about? They figured that out ages ago. I shouldn't exist, but I made it anyway. So don't worry.
And we're glad for that. So, look, we're going to talk about our last 2 remaining quarterfinals of our theoretical event. It's going to be Na'Vi versus Faze first up. Obviously, that is the 2021 Na'Vi, the one that was sort of cruelly denied an era by fate and consequence. Although, you know what? I will talk a little bit about whether or not we are banging on that narrative a bit too much and whether or not they were guaranteed an era. We'll get into that. And they're going to go up against the 2018 Superteam Faze. Probably one of the most exciting teams on paper that never quite delivered on its reputation, and we'll probably talk a little bit about their legacy and what it all means. But let's start in the relatively modern era. We'll start with Na'Vi. Obviously, Na'Vi, when they finally got their major at Stockholm, many of us were there for that. I think we all were, in fact, if memory serves me correct. Although Jason sort of, he was.
Yeah, I was.
He was more.
It was up to him. Half was probably wouldn't be there, but
yeah.
He was more in the back.
He's on his way,
as I recall it. But
I'm the one pulling the strings. I was me all along.
Basically all I remember about that event was Jason going in a room with a bunch of other men in suits, and he just said, "Not for you, Richard," and he just closed the door and cigar smoke started. I think it was cigar smoke anyway. Okay. But anyway, so look, the major they did get was the most dominant major. Didn't drop a map, beat all the opponents you would want them to beat to have a legitimate win. Wasn't like it was just a super easy run. They did it in dominant form. I mean, one of the things that was probably a little bit overshadowed, although, sure, people recognized it and were talking about it, was the incredible performance of Bit, who obviously had been plying his trade primarily online. We didn't really know what he was going to do at the highest level, and actually, if anything, elevated his game. Despite being a rookie player, simple in tournament winning form, just absolutely god tier. We'll talk a little bit about him and his longevity, but let's just sort of talk about the first part, this narrative that we exist in the timeline because of Putin's shenanigans, that we don't get to see a Na'Vi that would have easily dominated all of 2022, would have took 2 majors back to back, no problem. Is that an accurate assessment of how good this team was? Because I do think people forget that even when they had all these parts, even when they had all these pieces, back in the online era, they were struggling to beat Gambit, who were very, very good, but inexperienced in LAN and, tournament environments and crowd environments. And also, they could have got their shit together a lot sooner and could have easily dominated that era too. So I'll throw it open to the floor. Are we living in a timeline where Na'Vi have been cruelly denied, or is that sort of an almost dismissive disrespect to the teams that have come in their wake, the likes of FaZe and whatnot?
I would just say this, like, one factor I think is massively underplayed when people do these comparisons is they're not playing against the same teams necessarily. So the thing I would immediately start with is, before we go to what Na'Vi would do and what the world would allow Na'Vi to do, I will just say a piece of information. I just looked it up now. As of right now, so we're in June of the year, we're halfway into the year. As of right now, if you go look at the top 10 teams on the HLTV ranking, the only team that hasn't done a roster move, because obviously even Heroic's just done one, the only one, as far as I can tell, is, aside from Na'Vi, is Cloud9. It's the Gambit squad. Every other team on that list has made roster moves in the last 3 to 6 months or whatever. So I will just say that one of the reasons why I think this shadow boxing is really difficult, it's the same problem we run into, if you notice, with G2 and Vitality's teams, where people are like, maybe they should have stuck with the old lineup. It's like, yeah, but they're not competing against the same team. So my problem with the Na'Vi angle is this. Na'Vi could have been exactly the same team, and I already think this year will be way harder because everyone made roster moves because they were so dominant, because they were so amazing last year on LAN. Like you saw, even the teams that came second at the major and Vitality was coming second to them, even they were like, we can't keep these teams. We're never going to win if we do. So since everyone did roster moves, and quite frankly, audacious roster moves, people went for broke. I think some teams would have got at least caught up anyway. I don't know if Na'Vi would then have won. They were an amazing squad, but that's part of my problem. Basically, my issue is this. The period where they were unbeatable was one of the weakest parts of the scene. And then unfortunately, the first LAN playoffs coincided with exactly when this real life stuff happened. So we never actually got to properly A/B test this Na'Vi against the weak field and now the stronger field of the updated teams. So actually the real issue is we don't even know how they would have done against these teams, really. Even if it was the old team,
I think my view on it would be that I don't think they were like cruelly denied an era. I think they were kind of cruelly denied like a chance to get to that era. Okay. I don't think you could say it was taken away. I just don't even think they really had the opportunity to establish it. I mean, if you go back, like this Na'Vi team has got to be like one of the most unfortunate stories that we'll have in Counter-Strike. If you go all the way back to even winning the Katowice that was supposed to springboard them in 2019, that was the first event when COVID really kicked in. 2020, yeah, sorry, the 2020 Katowice where everyone got kicked out. So that was also a chance that people were like, okay, this Na'Vi team finally got it clicking. They finally figured out, and then boom, online era. And I don't think anything they would have done if, let's say, they had kept at their peak and they had won like 80% of the tournaments through the online era. I don't even know if that would have mattered towards establishing them with some kind of like a dominant defining era, because we just look at like that is a legitimate asterisk that would always have been there, was they did it through the online era. And I think that terminology we've given to the fact that we were playing online through COVID and not to any kind of a team. So even coming back, I think, just man, that it would have been so great to see the kind of run that FaZe had to start the year against a top of the line Na'Vi. That, like, we were denied that as well, which is unfortunate. But Na'Vi never got a chance. I think twice they probably had opportunities to really build some kind of a bid for an era, and were denied both times by COVID, by a global pandemic, and a global conflict.
It's rough, right? Because you want to sit here and you want to go, oh yeah, like they came back into LAN light and that's where they were doing better than everybody else, and the other teams were weak and they were just dominating. But the thing is, like, they were just smashing the teams in front of them. So when you consider that fact, like, they're winning a major without dropping a map is fucking insane. Like that in itself is crazy. And when you think about it, I know it was the 2020 Katowice that you just referenced there, but that was a shutout. And then when they'd play against G2 in the finals, it was just shutouts. It didn't even look like it was a competition. It was like when Astralis was winning events, right? So I think that we were probably collectively getting ahead of the Na'Vi situation, as this team is going to have an era, right? Because it looks so dominant. And it was like, yeah, Duncan's bang on. The roster changes were made from G2, from Vitality, from FaZe as well, to try and catch up to Na'Vi. And I think for me, I was expecting them maybe to have, it didn't have to be like a mega dominant win everything. They didn't have to win Katowice or into EPL, into fucking Blast, but I expected them to still be the ones picking up the lion's share of the trophies for maybe the next 6 months while everybody else got online. Because we can see now that Vitality and G2 haven't gotten online yet. They've still had dramas, and they were two of the teams who made the biggest roster changes. It's teams who we weren't expecting, right? Like Ents, like where the fuck did Ents come from, right? Like they came from nowhere in this time, and they're one of the teams who are pushing Faze. Faze are struggling, you know, with this post-major hangover bullshit that's going on at the moment here. But this Na'Vi roster, when you reflect on it, I think that's the thing. Like, it felt like they were going in the direction of being dominant like what Astralis was. Like, that's what it felt like they could have been. But then we didn't get that opportunity, right? This stuff that went down, like the war in Katowice, of course they're going to be distracted. Like, you know, you're sitting there, you're thinking this team is half Russian, half Ukrainian, and they're now at war with each other, and they're expected to play in a tournament. I was surprised that they didn't come out and say, "Yep, sorry, we forfeit the tournament." Like, I was surprised that they even played. Right? I was astonished that they even played. And then since that has been Simple in a position, well, Simple and the rest of the Ukrainians in a position where they can't go home, and everything's like unstable. So it's hard to see what this would have become, but I agree with Duncan in the sense that the other teams definitely made these changes to try and chase down Na'Vi. I think it would have happened at some point. I just feel like they would have had like maybe a 4 to 6 month buffer, like to where we're at right now, right? I don't know if they would have won the major, right? That's a hard feat to do back to back for anybody here, but they definitely should have been the favorites for everything in the first portion of this year if that wasn't for all the bullshit.
Yeah, and I think as well the domino effect it kind of set off, right? Like, because you know you might have thought. I mean, we've criticized Boombl4 in the sense that I don't think Boombl4 is a great IGL, but I will say I think it's a little bit sad how his career has kind of ended, and I'm going to assume it's ended. Certainly at a tier 1 level, because he has had quite an interesting career. You think about the Quantum Bellator fire period of time and how they were like again a bit of a paper tiger, but obviously they had their shine a little bit at the major as well, and then ended up getting acquired by an organ, I think, fucked over, and having to chase down money.
When
and
they
then
get Windstrike,
yeah, and then he obviously gets brought in an RV by Zeus, and he says I'm gonna train him up and he's gonna be the guy. I just never thought he was the guy in terms of being an IGL. I don't think he's a particularly bad player, but I've always just thought that more than almost any other team here, it's about the coach. More than any other team in World Counter-Strike, I feel, and it's him being removed and then them going to a tournament. Like, obviously they just completed Lisbon this year with a stand-in, kind of like that, sort of, I think, validates a little bit that view. But he was obviously on that he was going to be on the chopping block at some point in this team, I feel. So for me, the story of their dominance is actually they were able to do it with this kind of like no classical in-game leader in the team, just a really strong coach behind them. They did it with a rookie that emerged and is like probably, listen, I'm not even going to say Ziwu is the best rookie of all time anymore. I look at where Ziwu is now, and I look at what Bit's doing and how he's doing it with a rifle as well. I'm more inclined to lean towards Bit in that discussion. So I think it's like definitely if the invasion doesn't happen, I do feel like Chad says there would have been another 6 months of trophies in the cabinet. The real question is, would Simple feel like he needs to go on a break?
Oh, it seems almost certainly not, though, for that, right?
Yeah.
That feels like that is associated to do with things like his real life's totally unstable. He doesn't even know where he's going to live. Like, and if you throw in, like, the joke is, I even said to people, you better hope Na'Vi wins that tournament, and they just won. That's like one of the few things that could keep him in the game. Like, that might, as long as he thinks he can win, he might stick around. Whereas the vibe was like, if it was going to be like the major final, like, fuck it, then I'm out. One thing I'll say is interesting about this matchup, though, is Navi's case, it's like indirectly happened, but there's even a shared thread between the two, which is the reason I think this is brutal, is I actually do think Navi had the chance to win more, etc. And if they'd have done it, they would have actually have succeeded fundamentally where Faze Clan failed, like Richard said in the opening. The problem Faze Clan had was this. I always tell this story that when I was at the New York event, which I had, where they just stomped everyone, including Team Liquid, and just beat everyone in the tournament, I remember just thinking, like, look, I'm totally willing to take it on the chin. If they can keep doing this every tournament, I just don't understand Counter-Strike. And it is a totally different game than I think, but I don't think they can. Like, I think this has to fade out, and there's no way that you're having a tournament where simultaneously Nico and Guardian, and then just Rain as well, just go supernova at the same time, and there's no point in Counter-Strike because they shoot everyone in the head. But the difference is, Na'Vi was actually making that premise work. That premise exists. They even just did it at this LAN with the stand-in. They managed to have Simple Bit and Electronic all frag out at the same time. So the saddest part is obviously this lineup now will never get to do any more of that. They'd actually cracked the code, the nuclear fission type shit that FaZe tried to do all those years ago, because obviously I don't blame fans when they on paper make those rosters. Your dream is that they all pop off at the same time. It's why when even they made this Vitality move, people even made the point. On paper, you have like the wet dream of like, imagine like Apex and Dupree are my bloody entry players. The problem is we all know in the server that never works that way, does it? Like there never is the combo where you have the two god entries and they both just run. So basically the saddest part is Na'Vi actually looked like they were going to be the one team to ever crack this code, I think.
Yeah, and listen, we nearly didn't get the 2021 dominant team, right? Because I remember when we were doing by the numbers and we did that episode where they just had the 5th to 6th place at the Intel Extreme Masters finals where they lost to Gambit, and then they obviously went to Pro League. They were experimenting, they weren't feeling confident. They'd lost a number of high profile series to Gambit by this point, and they were experimenting in that Pro League. Electronic was doing some IGLing, and I think Flamey was still a potential factor at this juncture. And obviously, they didn't even get out the groups. It was like a 9th to 12th finish for them. And so at that point, that was when we went on our rant and said, listen, if you want to not waste Simple's prime, Flamey's got to go. It's ridiculous that Blade has stuck by him as long as he has, that the org has. He's like the ultimate check stealer, which was crazy because like a few months later in 2021, when shit was going right, Blade came out and was doing interviews going, yeah, Flamey's never going to be a top player again. He's lost his drive. I don't think he can ever get back there. And of course, he had that moment where he stood in for the Na'Vi youth team. And he was fucking like, what was it? Watching that fucking
playing like a racing
Dead or Alive racing or something, wasn't it? Yeah, fuck knows. Anyway, so
or Sadikist bullshit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yanko got reamed out for tweeting about that as well.
I know.
Really?
Yeah.
He tweeted out about how ridiculous it was. And all the players defended him. Yeah, well, because it was like, the idea is like, it's fine to play other games. It's just like, not when you're on a stage competing in a final with the team that you.
Yeah, I would. And the thing is as well, it's because it's the perception. He's the older guy. He's the former pro, the one that the academy players are going to look up to. Yeah. Lead by fucking example, you pussy. It's a fucking disgrace. So, I was like, I was totally on Yanko's side. I think me and Yanko are pretty much aligned, like when it comes to our like coaching philosophies and what we expect from veteran players and stuff. But anyway, the bottom line is that I do feel that was the catalyst. Like the 9th to 12th finish at Pro League, like kicks them into a high gear, because obviously that is like a pretty embarrassing result for a team that has this like plethora of talent. And, that was when me and Duncan were in all the Russian fucking websites, like they have called Blade a clone and all of this shit. And we hadn't said that. We just said Blade needs to fucking book his ideas up, because they were still doing this belabored execute, T-sides where it's like you execute with 20 seconds left on the clock and can't possibly be a fake. And they did. Fair play to them. Like Blade really revised everything. They committed to developing Bit as a talent, and then they go on this tear where they won their fucking Star Ladder RMR, the most bullshit, corrupt piece of nonsense RMR that there's ever been. They go through the Intel Extreme Masters in Cologne. They win that. Win the next Pro League after failing the one prior. They win Blast Groups. They win. They just win right the way through to the major. And so, you know, I have to ask the question. We've talked a lot about the great teams in history and the great teams on this list and how they raise bars. You know, we talk about Astralis as raising the bar, taking us to a point where if your utility's not perfect, you cannot compete with these guys. Did Na'Vi 2021 do that same thing? Did they raise the bar tactically? Did they raise the bar in terms of the overall quality of Counter-Strike being played?
Here's the problem. If I say in this particular context, if I say, bearing in mind that earlier point you made that most people don't consider Boombl4 to be like either a super impactful IGL or maybe even what you traditionally think of as an IGL, if we take the context that they had a very weird team setup, I actually do think they were a tactically pretty good fucking team. Like, I was actually very impressed with some of the protocols they had, how they made all these stars work at the same time in the team. So on some levels, I do think they were impressive. And I certainly think if you look at the game, this is not really tactical, but there were certain things they had that I don't even think it's just pure roster strength is the issue here. Like I said on past episodes, the ability they had to win like low buys and force buys. I think that's the irony is the Faze Clan team they're against here got to be one of the few comparison teams. Like they're up there with the old like LDLC and fucking Fanatics of the day with the CZ and the Tech 9. Like you would almost think there was an OP pistol in the game where these guys could win the low buys. It was nuts.
I feel like it's a combat. Like they were the culmination of all these different years where different play styles or keys to the game were heightened, right? Like what Duncan just said there, you can get rounds from Na'Vi where they just have the AWP on simple and the rest of them are on pistols, and maybe there's one MP9 in the mix and they're going to make it work. But also on Nuke, for example, like their T side, when they would have Perfecto throw on the 2 smokes from spawn, you get the front squeaky smoke drop. Like they had so many openings, right? So they were tactically very good at forcing their opponents to worry about all these different openings to the rounds. It wasn't like they ever lacked ideas in the mid rounds either. And then they had the star players who could come up clutch. Like I just remember there was like one, I guess it was a pro league. I don't remember exactly, but it's like Simple is doing an interview with Trace on the desk, and Simple's talking through like a 2v4 or 2v5 that him and Electronic won on train, right? Like, and they just like in terms of like elevating Counter-Strike, I think the thing is Astralis kind of really put the spotlight on, you know, playing percentage and by the number Counter-Strike with utility to aid that. Whereas Na'Vi kind of were a bit more of a, I want to say a full package, right? Like you have the best player in the world of Simple, and then you have a fantastic right-hand man of Electronic. I think the thing is, like Perfecto, he came in and then they won Katowice in 2020. So he's always been performing above the level that I guess we've ever known him of, right? He's had to kind of prove that he is this type of a player. He wasn't like touted. When Perfecto came in, it was from Simon Gaming, right? Like nobody was sitting there.
And he was called Defecto at the early going.
Yeah, and nobody was like, this guy's going to be fucking sick. And the same thing like with when they added Bit for Flamey. I saw the first time that Bit played a match for them, it was like Electronic's internet died and Bit came in and played 1 round of Overpass. And then you started seeing more and more of him towards the tail end of that year and the start of the next. And then the player that he became, especially as we were returning to LAN, because this was the narrative at the time, right? It was like, yeah, look, these guys are good online. It wasn't just with Na'Vi, it was with Heroic, it was with Gambit. It's like, are these newer players going to be able to transition to LAN? And obviously we knew we were going to go Studio LAN, the LAN Lite before we got back into the arenas. But Bit was just like, he was bonkers. Like, it was like, this is not worried about it at all. First major, just wins it as this young kid. So in terms of changing Counter-Strike, I don't think, like, because I'm comparing to Astralis of 2018. Not in that same way, but they definitely had some impact. And I'm curious to see, and that's what we won't get to see unless this SDY edition or whoever they get as a 5th, you know, we get kind of it restarted. But we'll never get to see, because I feel there was stuff like Na'Vi were intentionally in the last couple of months leaning away from Nuke, even with Boombl4 there. Like, I feel like they're intentionally like, we're so good at this map right now, people are kind of figuring us out, let's just not pick it. And nobody wants to pick it into us, so like, we'll just play other maps. Like, that's what it felt like they were doing to me for a while there. And I think there's more to Blade than we've seen, right? So if we're just looking at the version we're talking about, the 2021 team, I think there's more to come. I think with the team we've seen so far, yeah, they had everything refined, but I wouldn't put it in the same page as Astralis now.
Yeah, this one's difficult because it's like it's so recent compared to the other teams, so we don't have really any of the benefit of the hindsight to see where some of this is actually going to go with Na'Vi. But for me, when I look at like that Astralis team, like broke the mold and created a new one for Counter-Strike, and this Na'Vi team doesn't feel like they've done that. It doesn't feel like they've changed the way the game is being played. It just seems like they're playing the game currently at the highest level that we have. I haven't seen them yet like break the mold in that kind of a way and introduce kind of new something new that's gonna define the meta or define this era of professional Counter-Strike. But obviously, still an incredible team.
I
Yeah.
don't think you could plug and play any of the Na'Vi stuff because the problem is you don't have their players. Like you don't have a bit to just get you 2 random kills in the middle of a round. Like that's not a fucking tactic. Like that player does that for you. So I also feel like that's why it's the difference. You could copy some of Astralis' strats. It won't be quite as good. You could copy them. Like they wouldn't even the way they use the personnel in Na'Vis. I think just revolutionary. Like, whatever Blade did figure out, I think he gets loads of the props for this team.
It feels to me when I look at it like the meta kind of, there was like a meta shift during the online era, I think because we were stuck so long in the online era. And I think that Na'Vi was the first team coming out of it to really be able to like adapt and perfect it to be good on LAN, because I think you had a lot of teams in this online era become good in a style of play where you were leaning a little bit more on individuals, and it was maybe a big strategic team concept and some openings, but like you were relying on decision making and decisiveness from individuals to kind of make things happen across the map. And obviously like Gambit was great at that as well whenever we practiced against them and prepared against them for matches, but they obviously weren't able to bring it to LAN. And I think Na'Vi was the first team to really show a way to make that style work, or have the players that could make that style work on a tournament setting.
I think there's something that we probably unfortunately don't have too much of a look into here either, but I would say, do you ever remember as many notes before across the board with all the teams before Na'Vi started bringing out, fucking
never seen them
pamphlets for
ever,
everybody?
Chad. Like, here's the difference. Glaive or someone classically might have a note. They might have one. So the joke there's like the Death Note angle. Like the idea like a whole team gets distributed ones, and maybe some of them are even different. That is, as far as I know, totally new for CSGO. I've never seen that ever.
And that right there is like what I think that this team is doing that we don't get the look in of. First of all, obviously because of the Russian angle, but second of all, because this is the type of stuff that you don't talk about, right? They're not going to give away that. But I know, for example, like the high level chess that this shit has come to. I remember talking to Hampus about some wallbang that he did to Na'Vi from in boiler to Simple's position in sight. And he said to me, he knew that Blade would tell Simple to stand there because in the game that they played previously on Inferno, not against Na'Vi, against a different team, they never flashed that angle. So Hampus went and came up with a wallbang. So we're talking from inside the boiler room through like that window that you can spam, but to the AWP line on site on Inferno where like you're basically standing default plant spot, right? You're on those stairs. But Hampus spammed him there, and he explained that to me. Because he said that Blade would tell Simple to stand here because they don't flash this angle. That level of like chess of the tendencies when we talk about it on desks or in casts or whatever, right? It's very difficult for us to give you a real world example. And the only reason I can give that real world example is because Hampus gave it to me. But I think maybe that's what Na'Vi forced everybody else into doing, because they're the first ones who are doing this across the board with the notes. And if Duncan's saying his stuff on there that is tailored for, hey, Bit, you need to worry about this, or they don't flash this so you can stand here. Like maybe that tailoring, and obviously I'm speculating, but maybe that tailoring of that level of play style could be what they have revolutionized and we don't know it yet. I don't know. We might need to get more from the horse's mouth at some point.
I think the game right now is being played. There's so many like little like micro small like bullshit details that can change the nature of a game. Like I know Furia, for instance, has like some smokes that just get thrown so frequently, but they like put them off by like a couple pixels, so it creates like a very specific gap on like one edge of the smoke that they can play with, that if you're a defender, you're never going to notice that it's the smoke with a gap in it, not like the normal smoke. So like those kinds of tricks right now are very like stylistically coming around and pretty fucking grimy. But obviously awesome.
Yeah.
From a competitive standpoint.
Well, and so the other question is this, because obviously Simple's such a talismanic player and has been for such a long time, so, integral to all of Na'Vi's success. Where does 2021 Simple rank up with all the other versions of Simple, including the one we've got now? Because,
Oh, sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, looking at the numbers,
when we frame this, I want to just add one note here, because I've noticed you can, if you're Simple, by the way, you're going to get hate no matter what you do, and here's why.
Oh, yeah.
Because all those years when he carried with bad rosters, what did all the haters go? Well, it's easier to get kills if you've just got all like fucking bad players. Then when he has like the best team ever, they go, well, he's just got the best teammates. Like, is he supposed to actually play a 1v9? Is that the only premise where he's allowed to like be judged on it? What are we doing here? Like, how could you ever begrudge Simple finally having really good teammates? Like, and then it's not like he then just got carried and had like a 1.0 rating. He then just put up the best numbers ever. Like, what's he supposed to do, guys? Like, it's not like he's supposed to like have the best stats, but then like when it's like the like deciding round of the game, be like, whoa, boom, it's like, let me get this one, bro. Like, I have to win this to close it out. Like, he is just a player. So I actually think that's an interesting comment yourself, because I have to say, my initial vibe is like, even though everyone wants the logic that you get better every year and you experience, I actually sort of low-key don't feel like he was his absolute best in 20. Like, here's what's fucked up. When I'm going from memory and like flashing all the great moments in the front of my mind, I actually think the best Simple ever was actually in the online period at the end of 2020 when Na'Vi was still didn't have Bit yet. They still had Flamey, and they used to finish like 3rd or 4th in every competition, if everyone remembers. They would always lose to like Vitality or the Gambit squad later, like, or the Heroic was ahead of them. Like, that was the one where he used to have to drop like plus 20 to even like win a series like in 3 maps, 16-14 on the 3rd map. Like, I actually think that was like the peak carry Simple for me. When he was in this squad, like, it's like the numbers actually did look slightly inflated. Like, I always thought he was like really good. He was the best player, but he didn't have to be like the best player every game. There's the difference for me.
Yeah. I mean, listen, so just to sort of give the numbers for it, because it's kind of weird, because if you look at the events on HLTV, they use their more up-to-date rating, which is a far better way to assess how good a player actually is. The kind of old rating is a bit more kill, death, assist kind of focused, but he had his best LAN numbers across a 49 map sample size, which obviously is reduced because, you know, compared to like 2019, because obviously the pandemic, but he did have his best LAN performances in 2021. And in fact, if you look at the PGL Major Stockholm stats he had, where he had a kill differential of plus 106 for the tournament across 10 maps and a rating of 1.47, you know, you're probably not going to see.
Oh, to average plus 10 for each map is mental if people don't realize. For that sample size as well, like 9-10 maps, that's impossible. No one will do that.
Yeah, you've probably seen there one of the greatest MVP performances ever in any esport. Like, it's crazy. So, I mean, for me, I always felt, you know, like Simple needed to like sort of eschew himself of the frustrations he's had historically, like where he has had to try and like carry bad teammates. And you can see, no matter what he says in those post-match interviews, it's taken a toll on him psychologically, as it would on any star player. The difference is, finally now, having this team, having this system, I almost feel as well that Simple really liked all of the teammates and sort of had some input in them even being there in the first place, along with Blade. Him and Blade seem to be aligned. I mean, I always get the vibe this is very much Simple's team, and he probably does a lot more in terms of leadership than people might even give him credit for. I'm sure he gets to have his input in the middle of a round, or when things get chaotic or break down, or if a tactic doesn't work. How are you going to tell Simple, no, shut the fuck up, I've got this? So, I mean, for me, I think probably you can make the argument 2021 is the best version of Simple. What I'm worried about now is, obviously, as he goes forward in his career, I think having got the major, having all these problems in his life, having become incredibly wealthy, a huge superstar in his own right, getting a little bit Valorant curious, V curious, you know, it does make me wonder if 2021 is that high watermark, and now we are on a decline, you know, slight decline.
Who knows if there'll be a decline? I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot to say in terms of his gameplay, because I mean, you're talking like very small degrees with how good he's been for the past 4 years, and having that conversation, to be honest with you, it just kind of bores me. We all know Simple's the best player, like just hands down.
What's also sort of says you might be the GOAT is when people can go, which of his 5 years was the best?
Yeah, I know.
Like, give me a break. Like, you know what I mean?
I think 2021 was the best version of Simple, just for the reasons, Richard, that you just kind of outlined there. I think I just saw way more and was very impressed with how much of like a figurehead and like a personality and a leader within the team he's been. Like I've been saying it for a while on a few broadcasts. Like when they call timeouts or when like a round goes south and you see Simple like calmly gesturing to the people and the players around him and like helping them move past like the crap round. Like I'm sure he says some choice words. I'm sure he's a little bit harsh at times, but it feels a little bit more like instead of like throwing a little bit of like an attitude or emotional tantrum, like a mini one in the middle of a game like we've seen from him in the past years, it's more of like a motivational tool that he's using to get his teams back into it. And I just like his demeanor during interviews, his demeanor when he's talking on stage about his accomplishments, about the situation in the world, everything just shows like I think just incredible personal growth that makes me just believe that this is the best version of Simple that we've had.
We did have like, well, he had that learning experience with Liquid all those years ago, right? Where he didn't have a great game and the team got him across the line, right? And then you started hearing in interviews from him, there's a team game and he doesn't, care about the accolades and stuff. They win as a team, all this, right? But I think this roster and when Bit came in for Flamey is the first time that he actually had a chance to believe that. Because up until that point, there was always some weak link or some guy, who has a good game and the next one's dog shit or something that was, fucked. Whereas this roster is like, oh, it actually makes sense. Like as soon as they fixed the in-game leading with the T-side issues they were having, as soon as they fixed all that, everything was squared away. You get what you want from Perfecto. Simple's always going to give his numbers. He doesn't look at Electronic and go, this guy's fucked. He goes, hey, this is someone I respect. And then Bit comes in, plays like a madman and probably earns Simple's respect immediately, right? So I think that that's the thing. Like Duncan said, we could compare all the great years he had, but I think, you compound that with what that year was and the type of player and person that he's become, then I think that's unlocked him a bit more. But I'm curious to see where it goes, right? Like it's hard. It's hard for a lot of these players to want to stay towards the top, and he's already been doing this for a shitload of time as well, right? So I hope that we're talking about this now and we do another one of these in a couple of years' time. We go, that was the best Simple when we recorded this in 2022, but he had a couple more banger years after that. But
in Valorant.
Doing that break, doing the Michael Jordan baseball break, he'll be back.
Well, look, let's talk about their opponent. Obviously, Superteam Faze, one of the kind of great underachievers in terms of what they actually went and accomplished, given the talent on the roster. Now, we talked a lot in the last episode where we were talking about Faze, about how this was almost like a team that broke the mold in the conventional understanding. It was always the wisdom in Counter-Strike that, you don't just go out and get all the best players for a position. That can't possibly work a roster of all-stars. It will not work. We focused a lot on that and how they sort of changed, the mode. And you probably don't have a modern era G2, and I know that's not working amazingly, right now, but you probably don't have a modern era G2 with that philosophy if FaZe don't go first in 2018. So pioneering in their own way. But let's talk a little bit just overall about the kind of talent that's on this roster. And I want to focus a little bit on Guardian because obviously there's that common thread of, the Na'Vi connection. Now, Guardian was, Guardian for me is probably the best player who's never going to get a major. And it's like mega sad that that's true, but it just happens to some people. But when he was active in 2018, I think people actually forget how not just good he was in terms of his high skill ceiling, but overall as well, how consistent he was. Like if you go and look at 2018 and you look at his event stats, there's not many events where, and again, this is using the new 2.0 rating. He's not going above, 1.1. There's a couple where he doesn't hit one, the ones where FaZe bombed out or whatever and only played a handful of maps. But in general, he was still in 2018, one of the best AWPers in the world.
It's another one of these situations, right? Yeah, I don't know. It's just hard talking about Guardian today, isn't it?
It really
with
is.
everything
really
that's happened. And 2018, it feels like a lifetime ago at this point right here. It's crazy how, look, I think the biggest issue with that FaZe team was we're going to reference it a lot. I know we referenced it a lot last time around, but it was how dominant they were. And it was like every player in their position within the team was already mega established, right? Everybody was. Carrigan, Nico, all the names. Rain had been around for a while. Olaf, of course. Guardian in that mix. And I think you kind of went out and it was, you got the best, the best, the best. We got the movie cliches in there. That's what they had done. And that's why having all these players at such a high level in this team and it not lasting or not being like as dominant as it could have been is the craziest part. Because when you have Guardian as good as he was, like I don't know how you don't win more. That's such a question, right? Like how the music stopped early with that team, because this Guardian situation with the story around Guardian would be a fun one to make, but you don't get the cherry on top of winning the major, right? That's what you'd want in this Guardian story. This is the one that kind of got away, the big fish that jumped out of the boat here. But if we want to talk about Guardian and the AWPing that he was able to get away with, right? I think he was one of these, or everybody knows like the memes that we have around certain AWPers, like Draken, for example, right? Like the 60-degree window, and not like only able to hit the hard ones. So have some AWPers we talk about, like when you would talk about Henny and KNG and stuff in that Immortals team where they were really good at getting stuck in and doing the combat AWPing type stuff. But Guardian was good at all the types of AWPing, right? Like that's the thing with Guardian. It was, if you wanted him to sit there and hold the line for you, he would do that and he would hit the shot. He's not going to miss that. But if he has to get in the thick of it, he's going to pull off the magic moments that are going to get everybody up on their feet, right? We all remember I'm trying to remember. Was it the train game where Matt's casting line? No, that's where he gets knifed, isn't it? I'm confusing. It's late, boys. But this is the thing with Guardian that maybe stood out for me was the fact that he was a good all-round AWPer, right? He wasn't just like a niche AWPer. He was doing it all, kind of like, well, I guess what we're talking about with Device, but he wouldn't, I referenced last time around with Device, he would drop the AWP and pick up an AK, and Guardian would just get it done with the AWP, right? That he was a bit more ride and die with the AWP. But I don't know. It's just, I don't know why it's so hard for me to talk about Guardian. It's weird.
I'm with you. I have the same difficulty, but part of it is like, I mean, just I guess like mini confession. I think of like all like the old school great AWPers that we had in Counter-Strike. I think I rated Guardian the lowest.
Really?
Like he was like for whatever reason, like if you like think of like Kenny S. I'm not saying he was bad in any way. I was never like high on Guardian as like this god tier AWPer. I just didn't
get him, Duncan.
Look, he was great, and I think he was wonderful early days, holding angles and everything like that. But he just, for some reason, he was like never high on my list, and I don't really know a good way to talk about him. And I think now as well, knowing some of the stories also, like it's hard for me to like find like positive things to discuss about his gameplay. I always felt like Guardian was kind of like and this is one of those things that I'll have no evidence to back it up. But I've always felt like Guardian was someone who just like was one of those guys, one of those AWPers who was going to deliver you a great game, but he was also going to make the critical mistake late in the game that like he outpositioned himself, got himself killed too early, and like really dropped the ball at a moment where it was necessary in a match. But I think the story of this Faze lineup, as it's already been introduced, is just like, man, how did they not win way more? This had to have been one of the great honeymoon periods of all time, this run when they finally got the super team together, but God, it didn't last long at all.
No.
I actually think Guardian in this team is a massive plus for Carrigan's career, because what people are going to forget is this: two details. One, right before this, he was in Na'Vi with Simple, and Guardian was fucking semi-washed at that point, guys. Like, he obviously didn't get along with Simple, and that actually showed in his game. Guardian's game went way downhill, and he was having tournaments where he just looked average. He wasn't this, like... Remember, he used to be Simple before that. He was the guy, one-man carrying, you know. Yeah. Whereas in this team, he was not looking that great, and people forget, after Carrigan left Na'Vi, Faze, and not only did you have the latter part of Faze for Guardian, but then he went back to Na'Vi. He was terrible. Like... Actually, Guardian, I don't know what... Again, Carrigan's strength, essentially, is not that he tells you how to play. He just figures out how to make you comfortable. Man, did he make this guy comfortable. Because he came right back to his, like, peak form, almost. Like, I think in Faze, he looked almost as good as in his Na'Vi prime from years and years earlier when it used to be the Zeus era. Like, he was really good in this Faze Clan team. I also think as well, by the way, the reason I give some... Here's the difference. If you're someone like Carrigan or Olaf, I'm way harsher on you with the Faze Clan team. I actually think the reason why the Faze Clan team was so unique, and for this lineup of players made sense, is because think of these three players. Nico is from Bosnia, right? Forget even just Bosnia, the country. Make that whole region, you'll never make a #1 team in the world. Impossible. Then you go to Guardian, he's from Slovakia. Again, take the whole V4 region. You can't make a team that's #1 from that region. Rain is from Norway. Sure, you can play in a Swedish team. Spoiler, the Swedes will just stick to Swedes most of the time. So these 3 players, by the way, need a team like Faze Clan. To be number 1, they have to go international, basically. If it makes the sense to gamble, then. So all I would say is this. Remember, when we judge like Guardian against Kenny S, except for the end of Kenny S's career, Kenny S is playing in French teams the whole time. Speaking French, French culture, people who've played with this all, like, people like Nico and Guardian, I always give them a pass in the sense that, like, they have to try the hardest possible route to success. They have to go in an international team, find other people that they can sort of work with, and then try what the other teams are all doing with the advantages of being Danish or being Swedish or being from America or something. So I think Guardian was a phenomenal player. Sadly, his career did sort of zig when he should have zagged, like most of the time, except ironically for this Faze Clan team. He wasn't the favourite in any of those major finals. He wasn't supposed to win them. Most of the times, he actually had a simplest career. He carried you to the final, but then gets all the shit for not winning the final. It's like, mate, people like Simple Guardian, their teams had no business being in these finals in the first place. So once they get there, yes, they can break down. So I think, to me, I actually thought he was the player that sort of almost completed this team, because Nico was clearly like the main superstar. That was when Nico was himself. Obviously, he'd been ready for a great IGL. He's gotten Carrigan. He's had him for 6 months. But if you didn't have Guardian, the difference is this team would have been like, it would have been all about the Nico angle. It'd be all for, can he do it like Simple can? Guardian actually meant you had legit firepower in this team, and he's an AWPer. Here's the thing I'll even say, just an eye test thing about Guardian I always thought was very interesting was, I was never one of those guys who actually knew off by heart, like, I'm not like, if people know Semphis back in the day was the perfect example of this. He would always know everyone's sensitivity, the fucking, all the shit that they have on the wikis now that you can just look up, but they didn't used to have wikis for those. You had to just be a nerd and know what everyone's settings were for the monitor and the keyboard, right? So because I didn't know this, one thing I didn't know back in the day is, I don't know if you know this, Chad, do you know Guardian uses quite a low sensitivity?
Yeah. How low are we talking here?
If you go and look, it's lower than you'd expect. Go look on those sites where you do the DPI and stuff like. Mate, it'll shock you, because if you watch his game, you would think not like, look, he's not like Simple, but you would think he's had a fast sensitivity. He's a really fast player when he uses the AWP, but genuinely he must just have it perfected. That tells me you perfected your AWP mechanics. When you actually have like a fairly low sense, but you're just a monster anyway. Like you would never see in his game like, oh, he's too slow. You should put that sensor up there. Like, he looks fucking sick in the game. The eye test checks out like a motherfucker for Guardian, in my opinion.
Yeah, and look, here's, because I'm going to segue into talking about Nico a little bit here, but just to give you an idea of like how slept on, I still sort of think he is a little bit, right? So at the 2018, major in Boston, obviously they're runners up there quite famously. Nico was Faze's best player, 1.25 rating, but right behind him, Guardian 1.24 rating, and Guardian had a higher kill differential. If you look at some of the tournaments they won that year, IEM Sydney, right? Nico, best player for Faze, 1.23 rating. If you go to, and then Guardian just over 17 maps, just behind him, 1.22 rating with a higher kill differential. If you go to Belo Horizonte, of course, which they famously won with a stand-in, Nico was the tournament MVP. He was 1.39 rating, monster at that tournament, but the second best player at that tournament with a 1.30 rating, which on most tournaments,
numbers, mate. Yeah,
most tournaments that's enough for an MVP, and a plus 80 kill differential over 12 maps. It's Guardian. So look, obviously they're the tournaments where things are going right or relatively right, making it to finals. But I think people don't realize just how much of a stats monster Guardian actually was, and how he always gave you a bedrock for success within that team. I think that was the last of the summer wine for Guardian for sure. He was still one of the best AWPers in the world.
This, by the way, this is one of the reasons why, as much as it's easy when they fail, it's easy to clown on them all. This is why, unfortunately, legendary players get the extra couple of chances that the other players don't, because every now and then you get a career renaissance like this, where someone just comes back to like amazing form. It's why people will always gamble on like the troubled guy, but you just know he has mad skills, of course.
And so I said I was going to segue into talking about Nico. We saw some of the numbers there. Let's talk about 2018 Nico, because for me, we all talked a lot about Simple, how it's like, oh, it's a tragedy that Simple wasn't going to get his major, and we all had a good feeling that he was going to get his major. Obviously, Nico famously hasn't got his. He's still, I'm talking about Guardian not having his. Obviously, and Nico, another one with that missing ring. And it's like, was 2018 Nico like so good a player that it's like we're getting to the same level of like sympathy, the same level that we have for like a Guardian or a Simple when he didn't have his major, because obviously I think probably in 2018, Nico was right up there as one of those players when you were talking about who's the best player in the world currently. Nico was always in the conversation.
I think I had him as my number 2 for 2018.
Yeah.
I think I actually had him like slightly different from other people. Other people had Device, didn't they? I know.
He's one of the big three. It's Simple, Device, Nico, Simple, Zywoo, Nico, whatever era.
But then again, I guess the question has to be then, he's never quite been the number one guy at any point in his career. So discuss.
I think the thing is, like, obviously when we compare to the years where it's been Simple as Zywoo, right? We know that these are AWPers who can also rifle they're just all round very good players, right? And then there was that whole discussion around Nico potentially doing some AWPing more recently. I'm glad that kind of came to an end, because I think if we can look to the 2018 version, right? Like the rifling is one the arguments of this guy being one of the greatest riflers of all time, right? That's the conversation that you want to have around him in 2018. Absolute beast. I think if you want to look like a little bit to the now situation, I still don't think the right team has manifested around him to get the best out of him, right? Like they're still trying to iron out those kinks. Maybe they're close. This Faze team probably should have been it, but because of those close losses that they had in heartbreaking situations, they lost trust in the in-game leader. And then as soon as you lose trust in the in-game leader that's going to give you and all the other star players around you the space you want, you're fucked, right? We saw that. That's how history played out. This team just got absolutely fucked by that decision, imploded, and it took them from this 2018 team until the 2022 team to actually get back on track. Isn't that fucking, and it's with Carrigan. Comes fucking full circle. That's actually insane. But I guess there's two ways to break this down, right? The Nico we're talking about in 2018, it has to be best rifler of the year, right? Like, so that speaks for itself right there. To the version that you want to see lifting the trophies, and if he can ever get to the major, then I think he has to go a similar path to what some of these other guys have had to, right? Where you need to wait until it's the right time with the right coach and the right players around you. He's still producing to this day, right? The number, like, maybe not as consistently as we would like, but he's still producing those type of numbers. So for me, it's a matter of when, less if. I don't think that it'll be the same sympathy with the Guardian situation, and maybe that's also carried a bit through because we know that Nico's he's been deemed, by the public as
people
hard
think
to work
he's
with.
part of the trouble, right?
Yeah.
I think he's part of his own problems is sort of the vibe people get. Whereas the Guardian vibe is like he just was unlucky.
Yeah. So I think that might be a little bit of a differentiating factor, right?
Well, I go back and forth on that topic because I think unquestionably at various points in his career, Nico has been burdensome to team chemistry. Now, I won't talk about the Nico Sports era when he was on that Mouse Sports team. Because I mean,
so many bigger problems in that team.
I would have quit the fucking game entirely if I had to drag Dennis, Spiddy, and come on, there's limits, right? I don't mind him getting frustrated there. But obviously in this Faze team, there were a lot of rumblings around that he was like undermining Carrigan, especially towards the end. That he didn't approve of even some of the ways that other players were playing on the roster, and he seemed to cut a very difficult figure. And one of the things that if you know Carrigan and you know Guardian, we just talked about it with Simple, they don't really fuck with that. They don't really fuck with the big personality that's going to get in your face and tell you to pull your finger out your ass. And I do wonder a little bit if just chemistry-wise it was off. I think Nico will probably look back on 2018 Faze and realize that was the team. Like if he had to do more with it, he had to make it work. I'm not saying he underperformed, but there had to be a way you could have got those 5 players to win more trophies. And also I think him falling out with Carrigan is just so crazy to me. Still to this day, the fact that they can't get on or don't have the same philosophy, it's madness. That could have been a duo that could have created teams year after year after year that would have won trophies.
That's wild, isn't it? That's the great what if right there, isn't it? If they just stayed together. It's like the Shaq Kobe story. Like, what if they just stayed together the whole careers?
Yeah. I think we have to be careful. I don't think that particular breakdown of the 2018 phase can be just boiled down to like the Nico Kerrigan.
No, sure, because
relationship.
the Olaf Meister stuff's in there as well, right? Remember that one of the big hindrances to this team was obviously Olaf had some personal problems, had to take some time out of the game. The org all universally agreed, all the players agreed, we don't want to cut him, and this is how they end up going to like you know, I'm talking about Belo Horizonte and stuff. We sort of have to agree you can't really count the tournaments they win with standings towards their collective greatness, and that makes them an even more disappointing lineup for me.
For sure.
I think I think that's the bigger point. I mean, I even talked with Kerrigan about this in a podcast we did just right before Blast Lisbon, and he just even mentioned, I mean, talking about it, he was like, it wasn't the Boston major that killed us, it was the loss in Katowice was the one that really broke the team. And then after that, Olaf going on his extended break and the mismanagement of just having constant stand-ins for 6-7 months and the inability to progress. So I think really, I mean, if you look at this 2018, sure, there was a breakdown in the relationship between the players and between Nico and whoever. But more than anything, I would pin this on, I think phase of 2018, 2019, and maybe even 2020 has to have been one of the most mismanaged Counter-Strike teams out there. And phase, famously, everyone who's gone through that organization has just mentioned like that as an organization is just not really been willing to have like a big hand in the operation of Counter-Strike. Like, even if you just go to the fact that the content org doesn't really make a whole lot of content around their Counter-Strike team is unfathomable to a certain extent. But, the esports side of this Counter-Strike team has never really been a super big interest for the phase management.
Gotta sell that crypto, Jason. It's a busy time.
They got to make sure they're on all the next griffs. But I mean, I think that more than anything, and it's certainly unfortunate that Nico and Kerrigan did kind of break down in that way. But I mean, it's just sticking to Nico as a player, this was, I think, even still just another great year for Nico, like individually. And I think he's still searching for what he was looking for in 2018, which was he's looking for that relationship with an in-game leader that he can fully trust. And it obviously wasn't there with Kerrigan, or maybe if it was, it did break down after Katowice, whatever it might be. But like that's kind of the thing that we've seen all the stars. Because look, Simple had the same reputation as Nico as well.
His fucking Nico, though. That's the problem, isn't it?
The joke is the problem. Nico's at that stage, right, where the joke is, it's like he's like the 32-year-old woman, where it's like, look, mate, the window's running out, but then his requirements are like, must be 6'2", jacked, be a fucking professional guy, have like money, live in Monte Carlo. Like, mate, you're not going to get someone with that list. Like, beggars can't be choosers eventually, mate. You've got to just take someone, haven't you? Like, fucking hell. Where is this perfect IGL? Where is this perfect IGL? Because I think, by the way, here's the difference. Obviously, now the Kerrigan angle doesn't matter because he did win his major. But I actually think bigger than Kerrigan, it's actually Nico that this team blows back on and makes him look really silly that he didn't win like a major with this squad. Because as we're talking about, dude, for that year, 2018, like I said, for me, there's only Simple was better as far as I'm concerned. And if you look at that year, mate, like the joke is, even when the team's broken, when Olaf Meister goes out, he's carrying events with stand-ins. By the way, you're supposed to lose the event when you have a stand-in. Later on in the year, when they make Kerrigan not be the IGL, but stay in the game as like a shit support player, they were winning tournaments doing that. They were beating Na'Vi. By the way, do people know how many fucking games Nico's won against Prime Astralis, the 2018 one? Even when Kerrigan wasn't his IGL, he's winning most of the games against this squad, like the unbeatable team. So, like, I think if you look at what an amazing player he was that year, no matter what you know about maybe he knows something we don't know about the relationship dynamic, you still at least got to look back and go, what a waste. Like, I had a year where I was like the second best player and I got not that much for it at the end. I got like a few trophies, and as we're saying, some of them were with the bloody stand-ins. Like, that has to look, you have to look back and go, what a wasted year, you know? Because if you're as good as him, if you're a fan, you have to understand, when you're as good as people like Nico are in those years, essentially you have to win everything. It's not enough to just be like, well, I got a few trophies. It's like, mate, chance will be a fine thing for people to be as good as you could be that year. Like, other people, like the Cold Series of the year, they get like 1 or 2 of those years ever. Olaf Meister got 1 year like that ever. If you don't strike while the iron's hot, like, that's why, if anything, Nico's career, it's actually had the simplest quality. Like, the fact he's still in the mix now, like, he could still turn this around like Simple did and win now, all these years later. Because I would say that, like Chad said earlier, obviously he was the #1 rifler that year. That's the sad thing about Nico's career. I think he's the best rifler ever in CSGO. You can take all the others, Cold Jira, get right. They might have had the better teams, they might have won more to them, but if we're talking a raw level of play and longevity, this guy's done it. I think he's just the best out of the rifles. And if he ends his career without winning a major, sure, he was 1 round away, but it's still going to be an absolute travesty, in my opinion. Yeah. Even if there's good reasons for it.
Well, let's just do a quick little sort of head-to-head assessment of the two teams, and then we'll get to voting. So obviously, you know the rosters. You've seen them, haven't you? You know, you certainly can remember the 2021 Na'Vi. It's it's the one with Boombl4 in. But the Faze Clan, obviously, Rain, Carrigan, Nico, Guardian, Olaf Meister. And remember where they were in terms of talent in 2018. Do they have the overall firepower, the overall moxie to be able to beat the 2021 Na'Vi?
It's weird, right?
21 Navi.
Yeah, I think most of us will, right? Just this is the strange part with this. I think both teams at the height of their powers were some of the most dominant teams we've seen in Counter-Strike, right? And that's the scary part. But you have to just if we're going pound for pound, player for player, still Na'Vi have Simple and Electronic, right? Like you can say, yeah, you've got Nico, you got Guardian, but you have Simple and Electronic, right? That as a duo has to be one of the most potent duos we've ever had in Counter-Strike, and then everything else that came on top of that. I think that the Boombl4 versus Carrigan conversation, I would lean towards Carrigan. But this is the thing, in 2018, it was that they didn't win the major, right? So is that Carrigan unlocked yet? Is that Carrigan still, trying to find his final form? I don't know. That's a hard one to weigh up there.
Yeah, if we're trying to do you can't really do like peak player because you'd have to take 2018 Olaf Meister over like 2015 Olaf Meister, right? I just think individually they don't stack up. And also I look at this Faze team too, and remember like that when they came together was what I'm looking at it now, DreamHack Masters Malmo, they got 9th to 12th. They won New York right after that. That's in September of 2017. They were broken by Katowice of 2018. And from there, it was like, a spotted good win, but mostly shit. So this team really only, the longevity was what, like 5-6 months of tournament plays? Like, I don't know. That's not enough for me out of the super team. And it is just a team that's marked by disappointment, unfortunately. So I think for mostly pound for pound, I'm taking Na'Vi players over their counterparts.
And that is the problem with being billed the super team and being the first real super team. Because not even early NIP is a super team. It's got Get Right and Forest, but, to a 1.6 fan, they couldn't give a fuck about Freiburg. They don't know who he is. And spoiler, coming from Source, Freiburg was a solid player in the Swedish scene. He was good. He played on the top Swedish teams, which, used to do well in winter when they could fucking go goblin mode online. And then when the summer came out, they said, fuck it, our teams broke up. We're going to go party, So, I feel for me that Faze Clan were a great idea. I have a lot of question marks about whether or not, if Olaf Meister hadn't had those problems, whether you could have got some of the last good years out, or like the last good months, I guess, out of Olaf Meister, and if he'd had a sustained period of consistency, would Faze have done more? Probably the answer to that is yes. But is that more enough to stack up against what Na'Vi did in 2021, where on the back straight, the last 6 months, they just fucking won everything? Nah, not at all. I feel like this Na'Vi team, everyone at the peak of their powers. I don't think any single player, not even Nico on Faze Clan, stacks up to 2021. I mean, even if you made a generous comparison and like you would compare Nico and Simple, but if you went like Guardian to Simple and then you put Nico up against another rifler, maybe Nico can cheese the victory in that respect if you don't go star to star. But that would be the only area Faze would win for me.
I've not been taking this hypothetical time.
Like I said earlier, the problem is Faze was only able to sort of get everyone at the level you get the on paper roster promises on occasion. Na'Vi did it most tournaments. Like that's the addition for me. Like the only team I've ever seen that's comparable to what Na'Vi did was actually the Team Liquid super team we talked about, where again the 3 stars could all operate at the same time in theory. Like that's so rare in Counter-Strike. It almost still doesn't make sense. It's why actually it makes sense that you just have 1 or 2 teams. They just become the exception that proves the rule. It normally doesn't work.
Yeah. So going for Na'Vi as well then, Duncan?
Yes, I'll go for Na'Vi on this one.
Chad?
Yeah, Na'Vi.
Yeah. Oh, unanimous. I was looking at it and thinking, when I looked at the bracket, I wondered how far this 2021 Na'Vi were going to go. And now we get into this interesting.
I think they're helped by recency a little bit. Not
Sure.
gonna lie.
It's another factor I think helps though. Is like the main angle for this one was obviously Carrigan beats out Boom, which is an IGL. The problem is though, like if anything, Na'Vi just showed us they're brilliant at beating teams where they don't even need an IGL. It doesn't matter who your IGL is. They just did that for a whole 6 months. Like all those other teams. That's why even the idea. I'm even a bit torn on how we do that. By the way, haven't you noticed how convenient it is that every team that is incredibly dominant was in a weak era? It's almost like the two are fucking obviously connected, aren't they?
Yeah.
Which is that if you never beat me, it's like the Mike Tyson thing. Who did he beat? Because he knocked everyone the fuck out, you idiots. The reason it looked like everyone was shit is because he just knocked them all out immediately in round one. Like, it's not going to even seem like that guy's competitive, is it, at that point? So the real problem all these teams have that are super dominant is it then just makes it like, but the era was weak. So I have a hard time with the whole Na'Vi one on that one anyway, because on theory it was weak, but at the same time, the whole world was trying to beat them. Everyone, they had all those genius players out there. Glaive was out there, Apex was out there, Carrigan was out there. They're all trying to beat them. So they sat around just playing replacements, was it?
I think the only legitimate argument you could make to like the competition being weak and for 2021 Na'Vi is just coming out of the online COVID era.
That's
That's
true.
such an
Yes, that's
intangible,
very valuable.
immeasurable thing that it's like that's the only real argument you could make for that in support of it.
Yeah, and just to clear, when I said that only Nico would be the one that would win, obviously Carrigan is a better IGL than Boomich, but as a player, maybe not.
Boomich is a better player, I think.
Firepower, yeah. So there we have it. That means Na'Vi go through. They're going to face 2015 Fnatic in the semis.
Oh,
so
It's an interesting discussion.
yeah, that one's going to be
That'll be
savage.
fun.
Yeah, I think that's got potential to be really controversial and drill up another hate mob, which I always enjoy.